Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi, my name is Nashwa Amira bin Tamiruddin. I'm from BMI cohort 12A. So today I will be present about my topic, which is anatomy of stomach and mechanical or chemical digestion that happen in stomach. And without further ado, let's go. So for the content in this presentation, we will first look the introduction and the main functions of the stomach. Next, we will also look detail into the anatomy of the stomach, which are location of this organ in the body, the structure and layer have in the stomach, and also the microscopic anatomy. For digestive system that happen in this organ, there are two types of digestion, which we will look detail later, which are mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. Also, for the last step of this digestive system in stomach is absorption. So in this introduction of the stomach, first, stomach is an intraperitoneal digestive organ located between the esophagus and the duodenum. As we know, intraperitoneal organ lies within the peritoneal cavity, which are the area that contains abdominal organs. For example, the organ is stomach, spleen, liver, duodenum, and onwards. Next, stomach is a J shape, features a lesser and greater curvature. For third, the anterior and posterior surface of stomach are smoothly rounded with a peritoneal covering. And lastly, the main function of the stomach involves mechanical and chemical digestion of ingested food. For the main functions of the stomach is first, stomach will mix and churn food with gastric juices to form chyme. Chyme is a soupy liquid mixture of food and gastric juice. Second, it begins chemical breakdown of proteins, which only then it will continue to digest in the small intestine. Third, stomach will release food into the duodenum as a chyme. Fourth, absorbs some fat-soluble substances, for example, alcohol and aspirin. And next, stomach also possess antimicrobial function, which, as we know, stomach secrete hydrochloric acid that provides highly acidic condition. And sixth, it stimulates protein digesting enzymes. And lastly, it secretes intrinsic factor required for vitamin B12 and absorption in small intestine. As already mentioned in the introduction, stomach located inside the abdominal cavity lies within the superior aspect of the abdomen. So it primarily lies in the epigastric region, umbilical region, left hypochondrial region, and left flank regions, which it does not have exact size because the size and shape and position of the stomach can vary from person to person. So here we will look the organs nearby the stomach. For organ anterior the stomach, we have diaphragm, we have liver, and anterior abdominal wall. For posterior of the stomach, we have omental bursa, the pancreas, the left kidney and adrenal gland, spleen, and splenic artery. For the superior of the stomach, we have esophagus and diaphragm, which inferior and laterally of the stomach, we have transverse mesocolon. So in the stomach, there is a large fold in the mucosa of the empty stomach, which are called ragae. This fold enable gastric distension depending on the amount of stomach contents. The stomach known as the most distensible part of the GI tract. because this fold is very flexible and actually provide larger surface area for the stomach to hold and process a large amount of food and liquid. So let's look detail at the structure of the stomach. So basically, stomach divided into 4 regions, which are cardia, fundus, body, and pylorus. So first of all, we have cardia. It surrounds the cardiac orifice, which is the opening between the esophagus and the stomach. Second, we have fundus, the superior dilation of the stomach located superiorly and often gas-filled portion. It will fill with gas bubble, especially after a meal. Next, body, we have body, which is known as the largest part of this organ because it serves as a reservoir for ingested food and liquids. And lastly, we have pylorus, which connects the stomach to duodenum. But pylorus divided into 2 portions, which we have pyloric antrum and pyloric canal. Pyloric antrum is a wide end joining the lower part of the body and connecting with the pyloric canal, whereas the pyloric canal, it connects the stomach to duodenum. So there are actually 2 openings of the stomach. First, we have inferior esophageal sphincter, which the food enter from esophagus into the stomach. Next opening, we have pyloric sphincter, which releases chyme into the duodenum. And earlier, in introduction, I have mentioned stomach appears as a J shape as it consists the greater curvature at the body and lesser curvature. So just now we already seen the external macroscopic structure of the stomach. Now let's look deeper its internal microscopic structure. So the structure of the stomach consists of 4 layers. From interior to exterior, we have mucosa, we have submucosa, muscle layers, and serosa. So on this slide, we will see each of the layer and its function. So starting from the outermost layer, we have serosa. Serosa is a smooth tissue membrane that made of 2 layers of mesothelium. And the purpose of this layer to reduce friction from digestion. And it also consists of the visceral peritoneum that covers the stomach. Next, we have muscularis externa, which this layer are divisible in 3 layers. First, we have longitudinal muscle layer. It moves partially digested food toward the pylorus. Second layer, we have circular muscle layer, which is controls movement of the chyme into the duodenum, and it constantly constricted, and also the muscle fibers run concentric to the longitudinal axis of the stomach. And for the last layer of this muscularis externa, we have oblique muscle layer, which creates a churning motion to mash out food. For the inner sub of the stomach, we have submucosa, which a layer of connective tissue with blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatics branch into layers immediately adjacent. So lastly, the innermost layer of the stomach that comes in contact with partially digested food is lined with mucosa. Mucosa lined by simple columnar epithelium and covered by a protective alkaline mucus layer. And at the lamina propria regions, there are secretory cells extend down into the lamina, which are called gastric glands. And at the surface of the mucous cells, which are the epithelial layer, contains numerous invaginations called gastric pits, which is a gastric glands open into bottom of narrow channels. And the inferior layer of the mucosa is muscularis mucosa, which is just a thin layer of smooth muscle. So basically, the gastric mucosa contains 6 different types of cells. In addition to the tall columnar surface epithelial cells, there are 5 common cell types found in the various gastric glands. So for the first cell, which surface mucus cell, it secretes mucus that protect the stomach from gastric juice. And there are variety of specialized exocrine and endocrine cell types populate the gastric glands and pits. So first we have exocrine glands, which the mucus neck cell, it secretes the mucus. Parietal cell secretes hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. And the last exocrine gland is chief cell. It secretes pepsinogen and gastric lipase. For endocrine glands, we have G cell that secretes the hormone gastrin. This G cell located mainly in pylori antrum, and it secretes the hormone gastrin into the bloodstream. So to complete the digestion in the stomach, basically there are 2 types of digestion, which are mechanical and chemical digestion. So first we will look into the mechanical digestion, which it involves physically breaking down food substances into smaller particles by the movement of peristalsis. So we will see peristalsis is a gentle rippling peristaltic movement called missing wave pass over the stomach every 15 to 25 seconds. This wave will macerate food and mix it with secretions of the gastric glands and reduce it to a soupy liquid called chyme, as we have looked earlier in the introduction. So this stomach peristalsis basically have 3 steps, which first step is propulsion, which is a propulsion. Propulsion is peristaltic wave move from the fundus toward the pylorus. Second step is grinding. Grinding is the most vigorous peristalsis and mixing action occur close to the pylorus. The pyloric end to the stomach acts as a pump that delivers a small amount of chyme into the duodenum. And the last step is retropulsion. The peristaltic wave closes the pyloric valve, forcing most of the contents of the pylorus backward into the stomach. So next is chemical digestion. The role of this chemical digestion is to further degrade the molecular structure into a form that is absorbable into the bloodstream. So chemical digestion is a complex process that reduces food into its chemical building blocks, which are then absorbed to nourish the cells of the body. So large food molecules, for example protein, lipid, nucleic acid and starch, they must be broken down into subunits that are small enough to be absorbed by the lining of the alimentary canal. And earlier we have seen the gastric glands cell, which the secretions of the mucus, parietal and chief cell will form gastric juice, which total of the secretion is 2 to 3 liters per day. So as we know, there are gastric juice which is highly acidic in our stomach, and as a function adaptation to this, stomach is protected from its own gastric juice by a 1 to 3 millimeter thick layer of alkaline mucus secreted by a surface mucus cell and mucus neck cells. So the strongly acidic nature of gastric juice can kill many microbes, partially denatures proteins in food, and also converts pepsinogen into pepsin. So chemical digestion works efficiently with the help of this gastric secretion that's secreted by gastric mucosa. So first we have gastric juice. Gastric juice it renders the food particle soluble, initiates digestion and also convert the gastric contents that have churned by the muscular wall to a semi-liquid mass called chyme, thus preparing it for further digestion in the small intestine. And gastric juice is highly acidic due to it rich in hydrochloric acid content. So as important as the other secretion, hydrochloric acid serves as acidic medium for enzyme action that convert pepsinogen to pepsin and also kills the bacteria in the stomach. Next, we have pepsin. As in the previous slide of the gastric glands, chief cell secretes pepsinogen, but with the help of hydrochloric acid, it converts the pepsinogen to the active enzyme, which is pepsin, and it is the only proteolytic enzyme in the stomach. As pepsin acts on protein, it breaks down the protein to peptides. So, similar to pepsin, gastric lipase also secreted by the chief cell, which take part in the digestion of lipid and the fats. So, gastric lipase basically will split the triglyceride in the fats. And in the gastric glands, surface mucous cell and mucous neck cell, it secretes mucus. So this function of mucus to protect the stomach wall from gastric juice. And lastly, we have intrinsic factor, which secreted by the parietal cell. This intrinsic factor needed for absorption of vitamin B12 in the terminal ileum. And vitamin B12 is important as it is needed for red blood cell production. So for the last step of the digestive system in the stomach, we have absorption. So although digestion is a major function of the stomach, but its epithelial cells are impermeable to most materials and very little absorption takes place. So within 2 to 4 hours after eating a meal, only then the stomach has emptied its content into the duodenum. So this process usually takes longer for some types of foods than the others. So first is carbohydrates, which it breaks down the fastest rather than protein and fats. This is because that's why many recommend carb-heavy food for quick energy boost. For protein, somehow it takes longer time than carbohydrate to digest and exit the stomach. But it different with fats as it takes the longest time of all, as it contains large amount of triglyceride. So in the meantime, the stomach will allow small amount of chyme to pass through to the pyloric sphincter and enter the duodenum as a signal to begin the intestinal phase of the digestion. So for the completion of digestion will occur in the small intestine with the help of pancreatic juice, bile, and intestinal juice. So that is all for my topic. Thank you.